So is Russia on the brink of collapse? Are sanctions working? Now it has been almost 8 months since the start of the Ukraine war and the West imposing brutal sanctions. But it's not clear if Russia's economy has been crushed because we are getting conflicting reports. Now Western media is of course saying that Russia is on the brink of collapse, telling the world that sacrifices made when it comes to inflation and all those supply shocks are worth it. And Russia themselves are hiding a lot of their economic data, and this is making it into one big guessing game. For example, Russia's central bank is only publishing the total figures for their reserves, but there isn't any detailed breakdown. Also, their foreign trade data isn't public, so it's impossible to know the exact countries they're still trading with and how much trade is flowing into and out of Russia. Now, I want to take an objective view here and go through the current state of the Russian economy, the challenges they are facing, and if the sanctions are truly working or not. And let's quickly recap on the sanctions that the West slapped on Russia, and we will focus on the big three. Now, the first is sanctioning away Russia's vast amount of forex reserves, and back in March, Russia had over $600 billion worth of reserves, but half of it has been frozen. Now, the end goal was very simple: deny Russia their cash so that they can't import stuff and they can't defend the ruble. Basically, is to financially starve them into submission. Now, the second is banning Russia from the SWIFT system and the entire financial matrix as a whole. Now, this essentially cuts away Putin from the Western markets, and it came to a point that Russia actually defaulted on their US dollar debt payments even though they had the cash to pay. The American banks weren't allowed to process payments from Russia. And the third, and perhaps the most dangerous one, is sanctioning Russian energy. And this sanction is evolving as we speak, and the West is on the verge of escalating it even further by imposing an oil price cap. And the purpose is simple: cripple Russia's main exports and cut away their last remaining sources of revenue. But here's the thing: Russia's definitely suffering and the people aren't having a great time either. But the economy hasn't collapsed yet, and it likely won't unless a few things happen in succession. Now, remember when Biden said he would reduce the ruble to ruble? Well, apparently that didn't work. The ruble crashed in the beginning but has in fact rebounded to a 7-year high, making it the best performing currency in 2022. Now, the general idea of why the West wanted a weaker ruble is very simple. It's the same thing that's happening across the world with all the currency crises playing out. A weaker ruble against the dollar will mean Russian imports will become more expensive and drive local inflation higher. And this will help to destabilize the economy and cause hardship and anger in the local people. But so far, this hasn't happened yet, and the ruble is stable for now. But does this mean that the economy is still strong? Now, inflation is still crazy high in Russia. We can see it spike to over 17% in April and then taper off slightly to just under 14% in September. Yes, the ruble is strong, but when you are sanctioned to hell, all your imports automatically become more expensive and the supply of goods and services drop. Now, even Russia's central bank is forecasting inflation to stay high at over 12% by year end as they keep their interest rates at 7.5%. Now, Russia's interest rates are notoriously higher than the West because the ruble isn't a reserve currency and Russia's economy is much smaller. But at 7.5%, we are at pre-war levels. And what is concerning is Russia's industrial production levels, which are falling. We can see since April this year, they have been on a losing streak with their industrial output decreasing by an average of 1.5% a month. But if we compare this to Germany's own industrial production, we can see it is not exactly catastrophic. Germany is also suffering from horrible industrial production, and it's more painful for them because they are a manufacturing powerhouse while Russia is a commodity giant. And if we compare June 2022 levels with those a year ago, we can see the main destruction of their industry comes from motor vehicle production, for example, but their core sectors of oil, chemicals, and metal products are still holding up. So Russia's economy is suffering, but their main exports is still robust and not about to collapse yet. Now, the lifeblood of Russia's economy is oil and gas exports. It has always been about their commodities, and energy exports are Russia's lifelines. It's the only way they can earn foreign currency to buy other imports. And it is estimated that Russia will see a 38% rise in energy export earnings this year, translating to over $330 billion. Now, it's really no surprise. Because of the sanctions and the supply crisis, oil and gas prices are skyrocketing and Russia is benefiting. So even if they have to sell energy to China and India at a discount, The higher price in general helps to boost their revenues. Russia's raking in the money. But the big question is, will the good times last? Now, this is Russia's biggest worry because the sanctions are starting to bite into their margins. Firstly, it's very hard to estimate Russia's cost of production, but there are reports that it is around $40 a barrel. So, as long as the price of crude doesn't go below that threshold, Russia is still in business. But they're starting to lose ground on their energy exports. We can see a sudden drop in Russian energy revenues from May onwards when it was almost $1 billion or euros a day. Now it is hovering at only 750 million a day. And we can see the big crash comes from a drop in pipeline gas exports, the dark blue bar. And it should be very obvious by now why this is happening. Europe is slowly weaning itself away from Russian gas. Putin shut off the gas taps early in September, and now the Nord Stream pipelines have been blown up. So Russia's gas revenues are crashing. And if we take a look at the gas prices in Europe, it is close to pre-war levels. It spiked hard from June to August, reaching over 300 euros per megawatt hour, but now it has crashed down to 120, and this is not good news for Russian revenues, guys. Right now, we are seeing the weather in October stay relatively warm, and Europe's gas storage is almost full. So Russian revenues should continue to drop unless a blizzard hits the EU during winter. Now, whether the Russian economy collapses or not all depends on their energy sales, whether the prices can stay high enough, and if they can continue to find buyers for their oil and gas. And right now, things seem rather stable. Yes, the West has blocked Russian energy, but we have Asia, particularly China, still buying from Russia. To put things crudely, Russia's immediate fate depends on China. And at this moment in time, they are a discount gas station for Beijing. Now, I believe that China will not abandon Russia when it comes to energy sales. It goes beyond just money. It's about banding together just in case Western sanctions hit China in full force. The Sino-Russian relations will still be strong. And in fact, China has purchased over $50 billion worth of Russian oil and gas, and this extends to coal and refined copper purchases as well. But there's also the reality of the upcoming oil price caps. Now, Putin has mentioned time and time again that Russia won't sell energy to countries that try to impose the price caps, but the price caps open up a real serious can of worms. They give Russian buyers, including China and India, an additional bargaining chip. Sure, they will pay more than the price caps, but it will be likely lower than Russia's original asking price, and this isn't good for Russian revenues. So let's say the price cap for oil is at $60 and China is buying oil from Russia at say $80, which is quite a good discount already. China can now get Putin to lower his price to maybe $75 or $70, and he will likely comply because his options to sell gas and oil are getting very limited. And it's no surprise that China is Russia's biggest trading partner, providing them with valuable imports. So the balance of power in this relationship is heavily skewed towards China. And things are already moving very fast, with the US already setting a timeline for the price caps to hit Russia from the 5th of December. So we have to watch the oil price caps very carefully, because if they are implemented, this could crush Russian oil revenues by another 10 or even 20%. The big problem for Russia comes when their oil revenues dip below the amount of money they are spending in the Ukraine war. Now, war is expensive and Russia is burning a lot of cash to keep it going. Now, it's very hard to put a definite number on how much Russia is spending, but there are many estimates that put the figure at around 900 million to a billion US dollars a day. Now, Russian energy revenues are already below that figure, and if this deficit keeps growing, Russia might need to end the war or face a huge deficit spending bill. That could mean that inflation hell down the road if they start printing money. So if oil prices really do collapse far enough, it could end the war early. But as a whole, Russia's economy isn't doing well. We have the IMF projecting Russia's GDP to shrink by 3.4% in 2022, while the World Bank believes Russia's economy will contract by 4.5% this year. So the estimates are really very bearish, and we have to understand why. Now, ever since Russia went to war with Ukraine, companies are pulling out. We have over 1,000 brands either leaving or scaling back their operations in the country. Now, while Russia has tons of commodities and they can eventually replace many of the foreign brands, this will still take time. So there's a supply crunch in Russia for consumer goods, and this is why we are seeing higher than normal inflation in Russia. And when I mean normal, I'm talking about over 10% inflation. Remember, the UK is already above 10%. But the big challenge comes to industries that Russia can't replicate. And we are talking about technology, especially semiconductor chips. So most of the microchips today are manufactured by the US and her allies, and this includes Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. Yes, China's share is growing slowly, but this is going to grind to a snail's pace for quite a while. The US has slapped China with technology sanctions, cutting away AI hardware and chip making tools to them. So this will cripple China's chip industry in the short term, taking away any support to Russia. So this means Russia's military could be hampered as they burn through their microchip stockpiles. So when it comes to economic warfare, the West is definitely impacting Russia. But Russia isn't about to collapse back into the dark ages just yet. They have enormous stockpiles of commodities and some of the lowest energy prices around, so they aren't really impacted by energy inflation. But everything else from food to electronics are flying up in price. Now, the damage done to Russia is extensive, but the sanctions have also backfired on the West as well. Because Russian energy is offline, we are seeing Europe head into a recession and global energy prices staying high. We have Eurozone inflation climbing to 10.7%, which is a new record, guys. And we have countries that were dependent on Russian energy suffering the most. Germany is about to enter recession in 2023, and its inflation rate today is 11.6%. Now, even by European standards, that is insane. Plus, now, we have the Fed coming in to tighten, causing a global currency crisis to happen. So Russia is hurting, but the pain is shared across the world thanks to the sanctions. Everyone is paying for the consequences of both Putin's war and the sanctions from the West. But I want to talk quickly about the future. 10 to 20 years down the road, what's going to happen? Now, the problem with the sanctions is that it crosses many boundaries that we all thought weren't possible. It revealed the hand of the West. Now, the dollar has been weaponized in so many ways that countries, especially in the East like China, are now incentivized to de-dollarize because there's always a threat that your US dollars or even treasuries could get frozen. Plus, a global oil price cap from the West is showing that countries could get together to boycott your products at the expense of their own economy. They will cut off their nose to spite the face. And just recently, we have reports that mention how Saudi Arabia is keen to join BRICS. It's all about self-preservation at this point. And that's why there are more and more bilateral trade agreements happening that's only going to grow into the future. And those are bypassing the dollar completely. Yes, the dollar is the top dog right now. But if you rely too much on it, your funds could get frozen or you're at the mercy of the Federal Reserve, right? And if you transact too much in the greenback and the dollar shortage happens, you are screwed. And the big problem is that the sanctions on Russia won't be lifted anytime soon. Even if the war ends tomorrow, I don't believe the sanctions will go away just yet. And this will make Russia uninvestable in the short to medium term. The potential for growth just isn't there, and there's only so much they can trade with China. But at the same time, because Russian commodities are cut off, the world in general, maybe except for China and Asia, will have to deal with higher energy and commodity prices. So we need to understand that Russia's economy isn't on the brink of collapse yet, but neither will it see any meaningful growth as well. It could be trapped in a stagflation hell for years to come. So let me know what you think. Is the Russian economy going to crash tomorrow? Or are we wrong and it's actually doing much better? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.